Welcome to Bluum's Inspire Inclusion podcast, where we celebrate the amazing women within our organization and hear their stories. I'm your host, McKenna Tafe. Thanks for joining us. Hello, everyone. Today we are here with Dr. Katie Larsen. Dr. Katie Larsen is one of our educational strategists on our professional development team. And today we are going to be talking a little bit more about International Women's Month and International Women's Day and the themes for this year. So Katie, first off, thank you so much for joining me. Can you please just give us a little bit of an introduction and tell us about yourself, both personally and professionally?
Sure, McKenna, thanks so much for having me. This is really, really fun. I'm looking forward to our conversation. Well, my personal and professional life are very intermingled, I would say. My parents were both teachers. I sort of swore I would never be a teacher and ended up teaching special education and really loved it and realized as I went along through the teaching process that I sort of was looking for a sweet spot in the education world. And I found it by going back to school and training to be a school psychologist. And the reason that I sort of turned my attention that direction was because the school psychologist sits at this really important point as an advocate and sort of a facilitator between the school and the family and the student, and serving all of the best interests of that kind of triad. And I really felt like I had a strength in supporting students and families and schools and helping them to work together in the best way possible. So that was sort of where I began my true professional life, I would say, in education. And I trained at an R1 research institution for my doctoral program. And sort of throughout my career as a school psychologist, I maintained that research activity. I continued to lecture at the undergraduate and graduate level. I continued to conduct studies and evaluations and co-author studies. And so then this role with Bluum as senior researcher and education strategist came about at a really opportune time. I had spent a decade working as a school psychologist and absolutely loved it, but found that the intensity of the school environment post-COVID, particularly as it related to mental health, just was getting the best of me. And at the time I had two very young kids. I have three now, and my husband is a first responder, and I was sort of on the front lines of the mental health crisis coming out of COVID. And I just felt like I needed a shift in my life. And so I was able to kind of reorient and use the research skills that I had gained through my doctoral program and subsequent work to fit this role at Bluum. And it's been fantastic. It's really engaging. It keeps me engaged in education, which I love. That's my passion. It, challenges my intellectual curiosity and really captures my passion for supporting educators. My role is focused on supporting teachers and learners through education technology. So it's a spot where I've really, I've gained a lot more passion for education technology and still kind of maintain that original foot in the door that I had with my parents at a very young age, supporting their own classrooms. So sort of a long-winded answer, but yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for giving us such an in-depth background to yourself.
Sure.
And talking a bit more about, International Women's Month, can you tell us, when you think of the term gender equality, what does that mean to you?
I think depending on where you sit, it can mean a lot of different things. For me specifically in this moment, it means that we are each free to pursue our goals, our career choices, and our advancement without gender bearing an effect. So, or being penalized for a gender difference. So for me at this time, I know I mentioned I have three young children. It means to me that I am able to freely pursue my professional goals without being penalized for a difference that comes along with gender, like, having children or maternity leave. So from my sort of, narrow perspective at this moment, that's where gender equality sits for me.
Perfect. And this year's theme for International Women's Day is Accelerate Action. From the International Women's Day website, they said, focusing on the need to accelerate action emphasizes the importance of taking swift and decisive steps to achieve gender equality. It calls for increased momentum and urgency in addressing the systemic barriers and biases that women face both in the personal and professional spheres. When you hear that, what does that mean to you, or kind of what do you think of when you hear that?
It's interesting. I feel like this is a place where two truths can exist at the same time.
Hmm.
We have made tremendous progress in terms of women's rights and gender equality in the workplace. And at the same time, there is so much further to go. And I am a daughter, I have a daughter. And when I look at sort of the arc from my mother and her professional life to what I wish for my daughter, it's sort of that, two truths existing at the same time.
Yeah.
There are still such significant gaps. And, it's really interesting for us as an EdTech company. And I know from my own experience that there are systemic biases that women face. And in the school system, it's always been very interesting to me that it serves almost as a microcosm, kind of a perfect microcosm of the gap that I'm talking about, where on a
Hmm.
K-12 campus, at least on many that I've been on, the faculty is often 90% women, like so many teachers. I don't know if you think back to your own schooling, but
Oh,
at least for me,
100%.
you know,
Yeah.
I can't actually, until I got to high school, could think of my teachers being sort of more balanced, yeah, in terms of gender, men and women. And then
Yeah.
definitely not in higher education, the balance shifted a little bit. But speaking of a K-12 campus, often elementary, primary education teachers are women. And then you turn around and walk into the district office and it's 90% men. And that always threw me. I always thought, gosh, what is occurring here in the system that the leadership is not mirroring the teaching faculty that is sort of responding to the leadership. And so that always threw me a little bit. I think that the balance is changing, at least I hope so, as we look ahead. But that's always been sort of an interesting proof point for me.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't think I had my first male teacher until I was in fifth grade. So
Yeah,
I know exactly what you're talking about as far as that, like kind of the imbalance of gender equality. And yeah, I see
right,
exactly what you mean.
right. And you wonder. So I always wondered what is happening in that sort of mid-career moment where there are times to advance in leadership or not? And is it self-selected or is it more systemic, something more
Hmm.
systemic that's occurring when we look at that huge gap between, the superintendent's office or the Board of Education and then the folks that are performing those teaching duties on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So interesting for us to consider, I think,
Yeah,
especially in this moment.
definitely. Definitely. And diving into your career a little bit more, can you share with us a piece of advice that you received early in your career that has kind of stayed with you?
Yeah, I thinking about this question, I sort of laugh because I, did not earn my doctorate in psychology until I was 30. But
Hmm.
I think that I was always sort of a secret psychologist, or at least at least working on it early on. And I think that many teachers might also resonate with this. But the advice that stuck with me was from the first principal that I ever worked for as a teacher. And she not only taught this actively, but modeled it for us. And her advice was to seek first to understand, to listen more than you talk. And I have used that not only as a teacher and as a psychologist, it has served me very, very well. But now, um, having that attitude in interacting with customers, I think is really powerful. I learned so much from just listening and
Hmm.
opening conversations to district leaders and to teachers and sort of the end users. It's always top of mind for me to, you know, rather than coming in with my advice or my sort of like, here's my expert knowledge or here is my solution, seeking first to understand where this person is in their professional moment, in their professional role, maybe also in their personal moment, what's going on for them. It's advice that has really served me well across a broad variety of my different roles.
I love that. I love that advice. And throughout your career, have you ever faced any barriers in your career due to being a woman, or, any prejudice that you faced being a woman? And if so, how did you overcome that?
I had the very good fortune to attend an all-girls secondary school, high school,
Mm-hmm.
and it was an extremely good fit for me. I was a very shy student, and at that time in life, 14 to 18 years old, we had primarily women as teachers and as the school leadership. The school was run by some extremely brilliant, extremely powerful, very strong women. And so that modeling, I think, especially at that critical time in life, has served me very well. And when barriers have arisen for me, related to gender or not, I call on the memory of those women who I learned from and those role models. And, as a later on through my career as a psychologist, we're trained to sort of attend to nonverbal communication
Mm-hmm.
and what we might call microaggressions, especially in this context of, barriers in terms
Mm-hmm.
of, or issues related to gender.
Yeah.
And so I have experienced that in small measure. Things like not being spoken to directly during a meeting by a parent, usually a father, or not being what I felt having my knowledge taken seriously or my presence taken seriously, not being looked directly at, being
Mm-hmm.
ignored, being asked to wait for my director to attend a meeting before parents would engage or whatever it might be. So
Yeah.
in small measure I have, but I do think that having this early experience of there were only female voices in the room, 14 to 18 years old. And so I sort of carried that with me as like an expectation that my voice matters, that I can sit in the
Mm-hmm.
front row, that I can speak up as much as I feel comfortable, as much as I want to. And I think that was really a gift early on in life that has served me very well.
I love that. I love that.
Mm.
Perfect. And we talked previously about advice that you received early in your career. Based on your own experience, what is advice that you would give to a young woman who want to follow a career path like yours?
You know, when I hear career path, it's sort of a funny description because I think that most people's paths only sound, cohesive and like an actual linear path in hindsight, like in the retelling. When I
Yeah.
was going through my quote unquote path, it by no means felt cohesive or linear. And I think it's only as I talk about it in hindsight and I see where the common threads are that brought me to this point here where I am working in an environment that I love, at a job that I love, in a really fulfilling career. And I've been doing that, since I started. But I think more often it's a series of decisions and some sort of like off ramps that lead nowhere, and then readjusting and
Yeah.
making mistakes and trying something and trying again. So in terms of advice, I think the best thing I can say is to consider how you want to spend your days, who you want to spend them with, lead your career decisions with your values and your ethos, and you will most likely end up in a career that is fulfilling and meaningful to you, and beyond that, that fits within the life that you want to lead on a daily basis. So, when I was working in schools, I was surrounded by educators who I really respected, like-minded people who had a similar set of values and a similar set of principles that they were living by, which is, advancing the lives of young people. And then here again at Bluum, I find myself surrounded by similarly, by folks that are driven by a similar passion. And it really does make all the difference. So I think keeping that sort of center of yourself and not forgetting, how it is that you want to live your life or the legacy that you want to lead, because how you spend your days is, it sounds trite, but how you spend your days is how you end up spending your life. So I think that's a really important thing to consider as you're making career and education choices.
I love that. And I love how you talked about how it doesn't seem cohesive in the moment, but you can look
Yeah.
back and see the path more clearly once you're kind of at the top of the hill.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah. But in
I
the moment, it can be messy. It can be
yeah,
a little messy.
100%. I feel that in my soul. Perfect. And you talked a lot about, having really influential women in your secondary school.
Mhm.
Who would you say has been your most influential female role model? And do you have any female role models here at Bluum that you like to look to?
Oh my gosh, I have been so fortunate. I have been, like I said, surrounded by very brilliant women my entire life. So I would say, my original role model is my mother, who was a career educator, absolutely brilliant woman. Continues to be my main, role model in life, in all aspects of life. But in terms of just a little bit more narrowly professionally, I mentioned the first principal that I worked for, and
Hmm.
she just had an incredible way of creating an environment that felt very safe and trusting and
Hmm.
elevated each of us, called on each of us, even myself as a very young teacher, just out of school, called on me to be my best professional self and sort of set this extremely high expectation that you kind of felt like, well, I have no choice but to live up to it because she
Yeah.
was placing so much trust in me. And just the way she led with respect, this very like quiet confidence and respect for the people that she was working with, and that she had, assembled this team that she felt really strong about, and that showed. And that kind of trust really impacted me and made me rise to the occasion. And within Bluum, I feel like I look around and all I see is these fabulous women that we work with. I love learning from Emily in education services. She's a tremendous mentor for me. I love learning from Allison. I've learned so much about the business side of things and how to consider K-12 environments in a way that we can really be impactful from a business perspective, from a market
Hmm.
perspective. So yeah, just continually learning from our fantastic colleagues.
Awesome. And since working with Bloom and since joining Bloom, what would you say has been your proudest achievement so far?
I think not a single achievement, but sort of an unfolding or a process of bringing our knowledge about what is right for teachers and learners
Hmm.
and giving it a life of its own. And what I mean by that is, a lot of us, especially on the ed services team, are former educators and have a really deep knowledge about learning and the cognitive bases of learning and what students need and what teachers need. And so taking that expertise and through Emily's leadership, kind of forming it into a package that we can, a solution that we can offer to a school, sort of seeing my ideas and my knowledge and my areas of expertise that I've been, building over the course of my career, and being able to
Hmm.
put that forward as something that we can offer to a district, to, a group of teachers to help their daily experience teaching and in instruction in their classroom is really, really, really fulfilling and really validating.
The next question I've got for you is what is kind of the main change that you would like to see for women and girls going into the next generation? You talked about seeing how your mom lived her life and, having a daughter yourself and seeing how you want things to be for her going forward. What are some of those big changes that you would like to see happen?
Oh gosh. I mean, I'm dreaming of a day where we don't have to ask our daughters about bias and discrimination in the workplace for sure.
Yeah.
And not having to run into the issues of unequal pay, of a glass ceiling, of, being penalized for issues related to gender. I think we are so fortunate at Bluum that we are led by a really inclusive and very insightful team that includes a number of really dynamic women. But that's most certainly not always the case. And so I think just thinking about a day where women and girls don't feel any limitation associated with their personal and professional life, sort of a pipe
Hmm.
dream, I think. But that would be very encouraging.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And
Mhm.
talking about, going back a little bit to the theme of accelerated action, what is one bold action, either big or small, that you feel organizations can take to create more opportunities for women to grow and succeed?
I think that the steps that even that we're taking right now to elevate gender issues and hear voices from across our company, helps create an environment that is trusting of men and women, that is inclusive, and it works to establish a more equitable work environment, for men and women. I'm
Mm-hmm.
coming from a place right now in my life, like I said, of having young children, and I think a family friendly or family acknowledging work environment for men and women both, knowing that there are so many dual income, two parent households that are where both spouses are still working, are working
Mm-hmm.
full time, and being in an environment that supports that, understands that, and acknowledges the reality of that, while still trusting the people that we have hired to be the excellent workers that they are, is a great step towards creating an inclusive environment, and one that supports women in their growth.
Awesome. Awesome. And the last question I've got for you today is, in moments of self-doubt, how do you handle those types of moments? And what advice would you give to other women experiencing the same kind of feeling of self-doubt?
Oh gosh, imposter syndrome is a very familiar friend to me. I think that the more you learn and educate yourself and grow and develop and study, the more you recognize how much more there is to know. And you'd be crazy not to have a little bit of self-doubt. You don't know everything. You can't possibly, you don't want to, because you want to look ahead and see growth and see areas where you can learn from other folks, especially professionally. But I think in those moments, you have to trust the skills that got you into that room in the first place. Maybe it was your problem solving, maybe it was your ingenuity, your creativity, your boldness, maybe it was your confidence, or the way that you communicate. Don't be inauthentic. If you don't know something, own that and learn it. Use the skills that you intrinsically have, that led you to that conversation or to that interaction in the first place, and then learn it and grow from there. So I think just the reassurance and confidence that you showing up as your authentic self and opening with curiosity is going to lead you to a really great place.
Man, I love that answer. I mean, everyone's got a seat at the table. We're at this table for a reason. And what you
Mhm.
said about, relying back on those skills that got you there in the first place. I I love that answer. Thank you so much.
Oh,
And
my
like I said,
pleasure.
that was the last question I had for you. So thank you so much for taking the time today to talk with me about yourself and your experiences, and sharing so much valuable advice and information for other women in this field and in this world. I really appreciate your time, and thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, McKenna. I appreciate the conversation.